Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Greg Zumach. We got the two Gregs today. Buddy, how's it going? How's it hanging?
It's going. The offseason doesn't really feel like it's in full swing yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need to get to the winter meetings, but you need to get past the GM meetings, and that's what's going on right now.
I think that's a good call. I never know like when it feels like it truly feels like the offseason. I've been digging into I've been full blown other sport mode since the Cubs got knocked out. I mean, I obviously watched the World Series, but like I've been college football, NFL, college basketball just started up. I was at a college volleyball game yesterday. Like I'm full blown other sports. But this is an important episode, right? Like I think that we get more questions about the Rule 5 draft throughout the season. It's like, oh, who are the Cubs going to protect? That like I deflect to like this exact episode, than any other question that we get throughout the season. So today we are previewing the Rule 5 draft that is happening on Tuesday, November 18th. So we're recording this on the 10th. The draft is on November 18th. We'll dig into what that means and what that means for the Cubs. The draft is on the 18th. I misspoke there. The draft is on the 18th. The deadline to add players to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft is on the 18th. So we'll know what guys get added to the 40-man roster. I'm already off the rails in terms of explaining this to people out there listening. But dude, I mean, we do like to try to give some background as to what the Rule 5 draft is, and we'll do that off the top here. We'll get into some players on predictions on who we think the Cubs will add. We'll go through some options, and then we'll wrap this up. Should be a fairly quick episode. Am I missing anything here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, a real quick thing on importance of it. Most Rule 5 picks don't stick with the team. Like, they don't work out. It's really, I don't want to say a rare situation, not a rare, but an uncommon situation for it to truly work out. So there's a lot of guys that will get taken and then get returned in spring training. I actually think the team should do it more. Like, you've got like almost nothing to lose. Arizona Phil would tell you that you've got effectively 50,000 to lose, or 25,000. But when we're talking about multi-millions of dollars you could get back, this is absolutely nothing to teams. So it'll be interesting to kind of talk about. And kind of like what you were saying, which is we get questions in the summer. Love questions from listeners. There's times that we'll get questions in like June or July about who the Cubs are going to protect. And it's like, buddy, the Cubs don't turn in their picks until like 4:59 Eastern time. Like, they may still be running until like the last 10, 15 minutes, getting their feelers out, trying to use whatever context they have to try to see, maybe this teams won't actually take this guy and we're not going to include him, like Erian Rodriguez last year. So, even a week out, like I tried to ask around to folks and got nothing. So I don't know if it's completely decided, but if the Cubs don't have it decided, we'll decide for it.
Exactly. Well, so you talk about the importance of the Rule 5 draft. Like, I think the importance of the Rule 5 draft is not actually the draft itself. It's the fact that teams have to add these players to their 40-man rosters and give prospects a chance in the big leagues, essentially, in order to protect them from being selected by another team. So how this works, how the Rule 5 draft works, is after a guy signs, whether let's talk in terms of U.S. born players for some context in order to kind of comprehend how this works, right? So if you're a high school draft pick, if you were drafted in the 2021 draft class, you are eligible to be selected in the Rule 5 draft. If you are a college draft pick in the 2022 draft class, then you are eligible to be selected in the Rule 5 draft. And so basically it's just the threshold is 19 years old. So that logic can also be thrown to internationally signed players. 19 years old, younger than 19, 21 class, older than 19, it's the 2022 class. And basically the Rule 5 draft, the point of it is so that teams don't hoard their prospects down in the minor leagues. you have to make the decision on adding him to the 40-man roster or not. If a player does get added to the 40-man roster, they cannot be selected by another team away from you in that Rule 5 draft. If the player is selected away from you, then he has to spend the entirety of next season on the major league roster. You can't select a guy and send him down to AAA. You have to select a guy and keep him in the major league. So the outcome for these players, basically guys that are Rule 5 eligible, they fall into three bins. Either they get selected and have a chance to spend the year in the major leagues. They get added to the 40-man roster by next week's deadline, and then they're getting paid a much better salary because they're on a 40-man roster now. Or neither of those things happen, and they stay within the Cubs organization, and they stay in the minor leagues, and we go around and do this again next year. And eventually, once they add enough, they get enough tenure, then they become minor league free agents in a couple of years after that. So, clear as mud. Did I explain that clear enough?
Oh yes, is totally. Well, and when it works out for teams and they select people and it actually works out, kind of one of those uncommon situations. You look at situations like Hector Rondon for the Cubs, right? Like they paid next to nothing, $50,000, took a chance on him. You tend to see the players that stick are on these really terrible teams.
Yes.
Because it's like it's not affecting wins and losses. You can take a chance on it. We've also seen when teams are more competitive, there just isn't as much of a runway. Gage Workman, the Cubs took him last year, and that was very surprising. By the way, has it been since Hector Rondon since they last took a Rule 5? Arizona Phil would know, but I cannot remember the last time they took one before Gage Workman. It's always Cubs pass.
Yes.
And then you just hope that one of your guys doesn't get popped. But yeah, I mean, it can work out extremely well. And then other times, it gives players a chance to audition.
And so this year is especially unique for the Cubs, I think. And there's two reasons why this year's decision is unique. One is because the Cubs have a lot of openings on the 40-man roster. A lot. I believe it's 28, 29 guys, or sorry, right around 30, right? Guys that are on the 40-man roster.
Yeah, I think it even might get down to 27 or so. But I mean, they've got a lot of space.
And that is not typically normal, right? Typically you enter this stage and the Cubs either have to remove guys from the 40-man roster in order to add prospects to it, or you're really crunched and you're just adding 1, 2, maybe 3 guys to the 40-man roster to protect them here. So that's one unique element. The other is that, well, I guess there's 3 then. The other one is that the Cubs have to completely rebuild their bullpen this offseason. There's essentially 2 returning bullpen guys entering the 2026 season. And then the third kind of unique thing is that there's no real surefire guys that need to be added to the 40-man roster this year. Last year you saw Owen Casey was of course Owen Casey is going to be added. You have that most years, but there's one dude that's a no-brainer. He's going to get added. This year there's not that guy. There's not a guy that's clear as day going to get added. And so that makes this conversation way more interesting. And so right now, I'm looking at a list I have it written down. There's 45 dudes that are eligible to be selected away from the Cubs in the Rule 5 draft that are up for this decision. We're not going to go over. I'm not going to list out all 45 names on that list. That would make for really bad podcasting, obviously. But
it would make for great podcasting for this audience.
Honestly, you're probably right. There's throwing out some names, throwing out.
This is our longest episode of the year, and it's tons of viewers.
Talking about Marino Santi today. So I guess to preface this, we are only talking about the major league portion, the 40-man edition guys. There's also a minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft, which means there's a 38-man roster in AAA. We're not that's nerdy even for this show, and we get awfully nerdy, but that's nerdy even for this show. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to run through the names that are most likely to be added to the 40-man roster by the deadline next week. I want to lead this off by Zumach kicking it to you, and I'm going to do the same thing. Off the top of your head, what is the first guy? Who are the first guys that come to mind? Who do you think the Cubs will protect for the 40-man roster? Then we'll run through these names, and then at the end, we'll kind of revisit this and see if we've talked ourselves into or out of any guys.
If you've been listening to the podcast, you've probably never heard this name, but I actually think the most likely person that I would add is Riley Martin. I just really do, and we can talk about some of the complexity to it. The guy that I think probably has the most people twisting in knots within the Cubs organization, I can't speak with like a ton of certainty here, is what do you do with James Triantos? This is a guy who's been a top 100 prospect. And, I think that there's maybe an opportunity for him to go play elsewhere, and really for the betterment of his career, just because of like where everything, all the pieces are, not anything that's due to James or his work ethic or what he's done. But just due to like, I think he could benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wouldn't shock me to see it really, if I had to just like totally pick, here's what's going to happen December 10th. I will be on a plane actually coming back from Orlando at this point. I will say that they select Riley Martin. Actually, yeah, November 18th, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say that they trade Triantos.
Okay.
Rather than lose him in the Rule 5.
Trade him to a team that will protect him from the Rule 5. Okay.
Yep.
So you've got one ad on your right off the cuff to start off this episode.
I think so. Okay. This is where I've like ever since you texted and said let's do this episode, that's the path that if I had to just pick right now, and I could see us working together and talking and come up with more, but that's my pick.
So that's actually who I have. I have Riley Martin, and I do have James Triantos being added. I have those two guys as the Cubs ad and the Cubs only ads as of right now. I've tried to reframe my way of predicting this over the course of the last several years. Right, a few years back, I would always think about this exercise as like, who do I want the Cubs to add to the 40-man roster? Who do I think that is good enough to be a major leaguer at some point? Like, that was always my thinking. And I've kind of shifted that to like, who will other teams select in the Rule 5 draft? And who should the Cubs stop that from happening, right? Like it's you have to get in the minds of the other teams, not the Cubs. The Cubs don't really matter, right? Like the Cubs may think that Cristian Hernandez is still that guy, and he is going to be a stud in the major leagues. They may think he's the greatest thing in their entire farm system. I'm not saying that's not the case, but they may think that. But they may also think that all 29 other teams couldn't care less about Cristian Hernandez. Well, in that case, don't add him to the 40-man roster, even if you think he's amazing, because you know he's not going to get selected away from you. And so like that's what I've been trying to like get in the headspace of the 29 other teams. And so because of that, even though the Cubs have all this open space on their 40-man roster, I've got just Riley Martin and James Triantos. And so let's go ahead and just, since we've kind of hinted at both those guys a little bit here, let's go ahead and lead off with those two, and then we can get deeper and deeper into some other options here. Riley Martin, like you said, we've talked about him plenty on this podcast. Riley Martin's kind of unique. Riley Martin, this is his second year of eligibility to be selected in the Rule 5 draft, which guys get 2 years of eligibility to be selected in the Rule 5 draft before hitting minor league free agency. And so he could have been selected. He was not added to the 40-man roster last year. He could have been selected by another team. He was not. He came out and looked, I think, significantly better in 2025 than he did in 2024. And I thought he looked decent in 2024. We talked about him plenty on the award show about what he brings to the table with the fastball now kind of sitting mid-90s with a little bit of ride to it. The curveball that is the best breaking pitch. I think we identified it as the best breaking pitch in the entire system. The strikeout numbers for Riley Martin were outrageous. The people just can't seem to square him up. There's the batting average is sub 200. The OPS is sub 600. He walks too many dudes, but that came down pretty significantly as the season wore on. But like that's what you're getting with Riley Martin, the AAA player. And so I think that before I get to you here, Zumach, I think that like the thing that makes me say the Cubs do need to add him to the 40-man roster is because he does all those things as a lefty out of the bullpen. And I think 29, maybe not 29 other teams, there's a lot of other teams that would gladly add him to their roster and say, you're the last pitcher on this roster. Let's make it work. Because I do think he's major league ready right now. I think that like there's a lot of teams that outside of this Rule 5 conversation, outside of this 40-man roster conversation, would say, yeah, I want Riley Martin on my major league roster tomorrow to try to get out starting opening day 2026. And so like that's why I'd add him. You throw in this extra kind of full extra thing into the fold that the Cubs do need bullpen arms. I think the Cubs would gladly say, hey, like he's our cheap ad in terms of like bullpen help over this offseason to the 40-man roster and to the major league roster. So that's why I've got Riley Martin being added.
I don't disagree. I mean, I think the decision, first of all, I think teams made a poor decision last year. I think that some teams should have selected him and just brought him into spring training.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you really lose like next to nothing in the grand scheme of things. Because if you get it right, then boom, you have a very cheap bullpen ad. If you don't, whatever, it's $50K. Last year was a tougher decision. He walked almost 7 batters per 9, which, I don't love the batters per 9. I tend to use walk percentage, but that's maybe not as intuitive for some folks. It's 16.5 walks percent. That's absolutely god awful, terrible, right? Like that's 2024 entering the Rule 5 last year. This year, it's dropped 3%, which doesn't sound like a ton, but it is. And he's brought it down to 4.95 walks per 9, which is, again, totally still a lot, but it's just a much different proposition. Last year was the second year in a row that he walked almost 7 guys per 9. Yes, he was racking up Ks, but like that's you can't sustain that. It's dropped a little bit. I think his best is yet to come. His K minus walk percentage, which I absolutely love that stat, and a lot of people in the game love that stat. 17.5. Like it's really solid now. Like you can work with that. Again, for a guy out of the pen, like a lefty, to me, he's a no doubt ad. So I hope the Cubs do it because otherwise, I mean, gosh, if you're the Athletics, like why not? If you're any number of teams, the White Sox really like to take Rule 5 guys.
Yeah. I posted something recently comparing this season in AAA between Riley Martin and Luke Little, and the numbers between those two guys were outrageously similar. Like not just the ERA and the strikeouts and the walks, like the ground ball percentage, the swinging strike percent, like every single number was nearly identical between Luke Little and Riley Martin. And I'm thinking about Luke Little. It's like a team would gladly take Luke Little on the back end of their 40-man roster. And so, like, why would you not do that with Riley Martin? And so, yeah, man, I don't want to linger too much more on Riley because I think that like you and I both think that he is that guy. And honestly, I've talked myself even more and more up into Riley Martin over the past since the season ended than I was at the point at the end of the season. I think I'm more high on the Cubs adding him now than I was a month ago. And so. Yeah, he's my no doubt pick. Sounds like your no doubt pick as well. And unless there's anything else on that, we can transition.
Well, I mean, just a quick like offseason kind of preview here. I mean, I think Riley Martin is a good fit in part because of what I think the Cubs are going to do, which is, well, we want them to go after big names and all of that, but especially with the bullpen. They have always operated this way, but I think it will be even more heightened.
Yeah.
A lot of minor league guys.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, if there's somebody with options out there and some kind of interesting stuff, they're going to pounce. They want this armada of guys out of the pen, and maybe 1 clicks or 2 click. That's all you need. So I think Riley's a perfect fit for that. And, again, we don't need to go too deep into it, but just I think this is kind of the style of what they're going to go. And then, maybe we'll get surprised here in a week.
Let me open up the James Triantos talk. And maybe this is how we approach each guy. Why would or should the Cubs add James Triantos to the 40-man roster next week?
Past pedigree. What James can bring you is a guy who it's going to be more hit tool focused, but it's a guy that can produce above average offense. He can play second base. He is young. He born in 2003, so he's 22 years old right now. He's only entering his 23 age season. He's
hurts a little bit.
former top 100 prospect.
Yeah.
I mean, he hit really well in Double-A in 2024. He just had a kind of a step back year last year. It's effectively the first year where he hasn't produced above average offense. And I don't think he's far off. I mean, I think he comes into spring training healthy. It's not that difficult to carve out a role. The issue is why should the Cubs do it? And this is where I came up with that, because that's my argument for why another team should do it. Why the Cubs should do it. I love James, by the way. I'm people that have followed this know that I love James. I think James is an excellent person. I think he's going to be a great player. I think he's going to have a long major league career. To me, I just wonder more and more about if he's going to reach those heights, whether it's with another organization. Again, not a knock on him or the Cubs. They have Nico Horner. They have Matt Shaw at third base. Pretty much any of these
positions. Armstrong in center field.
Yeah, like these are the places that you could conceivably throw James out there, and it may not fit. If I could make a slimmer of why the Cubs might do it, they did a similar move with Ben Cowles a couple years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And that didn't work out, but they clearly like to have infield depth.
Yeah.
They saw what happened when they had to pay money for guys like John Birdie. Didn't really work out. They took a lot of swings at infield depth last year. They didn't work, but it's nice to have it. The thing is, if Nico Horner rolls an ankle, I have no idea who's playing second base. You could make an argument that you could toss Triantos out there in June for 2 weeks and not feel like that terrible. So that's maybe the slimmer of it. But then if I had to really think about it, I think it might outweigh for some teams more than the Cubs.
Yeah, I think I can put this fairly simple how I view it in my mind. I think that James Triantos gets added to the 40-man roster. The reason why that could happen is because he is viewed as Vidal Brujan next year. He could provide what Vidal Brujan does on a major league team next year. I think the reason why he might not is because the ceiling might be Vidal Brujan, and it's not happening next year. Right? I think that those are the reason why you add him or don't add him is how you view him. And I mean that like the add in comparison to Vidal Brujan in his age 23 season in 2026, like that's, I mean that as a compliment. Obviously Vidal Brujan, after he left the obviously was not great with the Cubs, but he left the Cubs and other teams picked him up. Like he played on 4 different teams. He's played on 5 or 6 different teams over the past few years because like what he does brings value of some sort, right? And so I mean that as a compliment for James. Yeah, and I'm just not sure. What you said of the Cubs potentially trading him to another team who does view him as a 40-man roster caliber player before entering that Rule 5 phase, I think that makes a ton of sense for both the Cubs and another organization. But I'm still leaning towards. I think what puts it over the edge for me, and what as of right now I still have him as a guy that gets added to the 40-man roster on the Cubs, is that pedigree. Like that's what kind of puts it over the edge for me, right?
Yeah.
We've seen what James Triantos can be over the past couple of years. It's like he's somewhere in between what we saw in 2023 and 2024, I think. But it's that pedigree of him being a former top 100 prospect, of him being a former second round pick, of people thinking very, very highly of him. That's why he gets added to the 40-man roster by the Cubs this year.
Yeah, I could see multiple paths. I could see a slimmer path where literally he's not added. There were teams that asked about James Triantos this summer. There were teams that the Cubs talked about with, talked about James with those teams and maybe didn't, nothing lined up. But I think the offseason's a little bit different when you're not trying to, if you are even to explore any of these conversations, they're in a win now deal. Well, sometimes, that's going to limit which teams are available. So I don't know. I mean, it'll kill me, but in a way that I think maybe it's for the best if he does. But yeah, I still see the guy who is a top 100 prospect and can produce, some good offense. And I think he could have a long career. So I think this winter is a huge defining step though.
Who's the next guy you want to talk about here as a potential ad?
Those were my only two.
Okay.
So as far as which ones I want to, let's talk about JP Wheat.
Okay, I like that. Go for it.
Yep. So JP Wheat's a really interesting guy because he was drafted in the 2022 draft and was older in that draft. Had kind of a weird track record, probably could have gone out year before. Cubs just kind of made like a really nice swing on him. And it just looked interesting and projectable, but there were some injuries. It really took until basically this year for him to get out there and be throwing, and he is throwing above 100. He'll flash some like really nasty stuff. But, and this is all respect to JP, he has no idea where that stuff is going. And he's in the Arizona Fall League, or just finished up the Arizona Fall League, and it's nasty stuff, but it is no idea where it's going.
Yeah.
And so, yes, could a team still take a chance on that one? He's probably the guy that I could be like, oh gosh, maybe you at least take him, bring him into spring training, just see if there's something mechanically that you can fix, or give him a cue and just see if he takes off. And then that's not difficult to put as the last arm in the bullpen. That being said, we see these every year, and I would have to say that he is still very far off to the point that even if that stuff does kind of fall a little bit in line, it's a bigger ask to have him stick in the majors this year. So I would lean towards no, he's not going to get added, and he might not get taken. Could be wrong. But I think he shows the foundation of why a team could at least internally be like, I mean, we got to at least talk about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys every year that in other organizations where all of a sudden, as the Rule 5 draft is approaching, there's the Jonathan Mayos and Jim Callises of the world that are like, hey, you better watch out for this guy in the organization. I know we haven't been talking about him before, but talk about him now, leading up to the Rule 5 draft. I think that JP Wheat is like a good example of one of those dudes that just pops up out of nowhere, right? He's in the AFL. Other teams are scouting him plenty while he's down there, obviously. Touching 102. He's the hardest thrower in the Arizona Fall League this year, I think, by StatCast metrics, which is fun that we have StatCast data on a guy like JP Wheat down in the AFL. That's super, super fun. So touching 102 pretty consistently, but you're right. This is a guy that would start next year in the Cubs organization in high A South Bend. Like, this is not an upper minors level guy to start off the 2026 campaign. But yeah, I had him on my list too as a guy to kind of just keep an eye out for, right? I don't expect the Cubs to add him to the 40-man roster, but in a list of guys that we're going to talk about here today, we're like, just keep an eye on him, right? Like, it wouldn't be shocking. It wouldn't be, I mean, it would be surprising if the Cubs add him, but it wouldn't be like, what the hell are they doing? Like, you get where they're coming from,
right,
if they do add him, you know? All right. Can I go next to you with the name?
Go for
okay.
it. Yep.
So let's go ahead and just let's approach the Brandon Birdsell conversation, because this is kind of a unique one going into this offseason. Brandon Birdsell, I'd say as of what was it? Early September, was a no doubt add to the 40-man roster this offseason to be protected from the Rule 5 draft. No doubt, even with the injuries that he was dealing with early in the year that he was coming back from, still no doubt he's going to be added. We're talking about the guy that was the 2024 Cubs minor league pitcher of the year. He was in AAA. He was already serving as major league depth in the rotation. Unique stuff. Very good pitcher. He was going to be added.
And could pitch out of the bullpen just fine.
Too. Exactly. Yeah. Now we're dealing with a situation where he had elbow surgery, and he is likely to miss the entirety of the 2026 campaign, if not the entire thing. Like, he's going to miss a decent chunk of the 2026 campaign. And so why this is interesting is because if a team were to select him in the Rule 5 draft and add him to their 40-man roster and their major league roster for 2026, and he missed most of the year, those Rule 5 requirements where he's on the major league roster then pertain to the 2027 season. And so I don't know. The problem is, I don't know of the Cubs or another team wanting to carry a guy on their 40-man roster on their major league or on their 40-man roster for the entirety of the offseason and next year without him seeing major league time, I guess. Talent wise, yeah, man, like add Brandon Birdsell. It's just a matter of what other teams kind of view as possible. You look at the Cubs, like they don't have a 40-man roster crunch, right? Like they'd be a good example of a team that it would probably make sense if the Cubs were out there drafting in the Rule 5 draft, because the Cubs could carry him on their major league roster or on their 40-man roster over the course of the offseason, pop him onto the 60-day IL and off the 40-man roster starting next year and be just fine. But I don't know if any other teams are out there that could potentially do that.
Yeah, and there's just not a great precedent for it. This would be one thing if it was, I'm just like picking a name in the division, but like if Chase Burns had to, had this situation, he is such, and this is again not a knock on Birdsell, but like Burns is such an elite prospect.
Yeah,
that you're like, well, yeah, like, of course you do that. But with where Birdie is, I just, that would surprise me. I think that the way he's going to carve out his career is coming back from this and really just, finding a role. Could even be in the pen. It could be in the rotation. Doesn't matter. Bulk guy. I mean, Cubs love that. If he gets taken, I think that's one of those where the Cubs kind of look at it and say, you know what? Good luck. This was a good process on our part. Like we did not make the wrong decision. We will kind of live with it. But I, with the caliber of person that Brandon Birdsell is and how he's talked about the organization, I definitely think that they would be very disappointed.
Yeah, I agree. All right, you got the next guy to choose from to chat about?
I do want to toss out Erian Rodriguez because he was the guy that we really were interested last year. I think he had some folks in the organization that were really pushing for that. It didn't quite click this year. Like he was at an inflection point last year where there was a lot of routes that could go, kind of like a pivot point or inflection point where like, hey, this guy could like really pop, or this guy may not. This year, he looked pretty good in high A where he had returned. And pretty good is maybe a little bit of a knock. Like I think he looked a little bit better than that. Got promoted to Double A. It didn't really click. He wasn't terrible. Like it wasn't a bad season, but it wasn't the season that maybe makes me go like, the stuff is popping. We got to take this guy. That's probably where I'm at with it. I think that the stuff was not as crisp this year as last year. It made me question it a little bit more. I still thought about him as a possibility. If he gets taken, I think there's maybe some residual. We almost put him on last year. Like we don't want anybody to take him this year. But I would have to say from purely where things line up, would be third or fourth on my list of like ads.
Yeah, I think the fact that he wasn't selected last year probably gives me and the Cubs more confidence that he won't be selected this year either. The results were actually good, like numbers wise for Rodriguez, but the stuff just wasn't quite as crisp. And so, I think that like he's in this same mix of these like next wave of guys that like are definitely worth bringing up on this podcast and talking about, and not surprised if they get added to the 40-man roster or select. I mean, this is the Cubs have added a guy like Erian Rodriguez in past years. Like this is not, it wouldn't be super out of the ordinary for the Cubs to add him to the 40-man roster right now. But I don't think that I personally would. I would like to see him start off next year in Double A and kind of force his way up to Triple A and kind of in the year, like we were just talking about Birdie, where like he's serving as major league depth, even though he's not on the 40-man roster, entering his minor league free agent year, where he could potentially be added to the 40-man roster, a lot like what Luis Vasquez was a few years back, right? Luis Vasquez was a guy that was he was added to the 40-man roster to protect him from becoming a free agent, not being a Rule 5 selection. So maybe Erian Rodriguez is that entering the 2026-27 offseason. So yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, next guy I'm going to go with here, Cristian Hernandez deserves some conversation here, right? The conversation is probably pretty similar to James Triantos, right? Former top 100 type of prospect, a lot of hype surrounding him. Not quite that player anymore. The difference with Cristian Hernandez compared to James Triantos are, one, Cristian is he finished the season in high A versus James Triantos was in triple A. And so he's definitely further away from the major leagues. But also, he does play a good defensive shortstop. And like those guys are more likely to be popped in the Rule 5 draft than a guy who can't play a good defensive shortstop. Like that brings that versatility on the bench that other players may not bring. And so honestly, I'm pretty like Cristian Hernandez, I could see a team grabbing him in the. I don't think the Cubs will add him to the 40-man roster next week. I don't think it's going to happen. But he is, of all these guys we're talking about, I think the most likely to for sure not be added, but then selected in the Rule 5 draft. I could see that happening. I could see a team saying, like, it's Cristian Hernandez. He was one of the top international free agent signings, and he plays a good defensive shortstop, and he goes and steals 50 bases a year. Like, I'll take that on my bench. Even if he doesn't hit worth a lick in the major leagues, like, I'll take that on my bench, and that's totally fine. And so, again, for me, he's the best example of not getting added to the Cubs, but potentially being selected in the Rule 5.
Yeah, I will be honest. I think he'd kind of surprise me. Just because he produced a little bit under league average offense.
For sure.
Double A, or sorry, high A, right?
Yeah.
Like I was thinking double A for a second. If it was double A, I'd probably say that he'd have a legitimate chance. If he does get popped, I think that's a team that was just having regrets not being able to be the team to sign him.
For sure. Yeah.
Where it's like, we wanted this guy. Like we've wanted this guy since, I hate to say it, right? Since like 10, 11, 12, which is just awful. But, but to somebody who's a long, extensive time that they've been scouting a player, and then all of a sudden he's available.
Yeah.
So, it's not impossible.
Sorry, I don't want to be coming across as like, oh, Cristian Hernandez, who was an average hitter in high A, like he's that guy. Like that's not. It's a matter of like the Chicago White Sox, or I guess the White Sox are coming up a little bit more. But we'll pick on the White Sox.
Rockies.
Right? The Rockies, the Colorado Rockies could add Cristian Hernandez to their 40-man, select him in the Rule 5 draft, add him to their major league roster this season. He gets 150 plate appearances throughout the entire season and logs a lot of defensive innings in the ninth inning of a blowout game, because they'll have plenty of them. And then starting in 2027, they send him back down to the minors, because you can do that after that 1 year. You send him back down to Double A or Triple A, get some more seasoning in down there, and then work his way up as a true prospect yet again. And that makes sense for the Rockies team, I think, especially for a guy that does play good defense and is a good base runner and has that pedigree. So, I think worth mentioning here. But not likely to be added to the 40-man roster.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But where I think if you wanted to do that exact same thing, a scenario that I was thinking almost to a T, like scary, was actually just doing that with Pedro Ramirez.
Fair, yeah.
So to use your Rockies analogy, I was basically thinking like a really terrible team could take him. Pedro Ramirez is 21 years old. He's produced above average offense like every year. I have to check that. It might be every year.
Yeah.
That he's been in the system. He was in Double A last year. He just kind of hit. He's
won
hit
a Gold
all
Glove.
The time.
Won a minor league Gold Glove this year.
Won a minor league Gold Glove. That's something where if you're a team like the Rockies, why don't you take a chance on that? And he's the other guy, by the way, that I could see the Cubs trading before the deadline. Like they just are like, whatever, we're almost definitely going to lose him. We can't justify adding him to the 40-man. We're going to trade this guy. Like we've had teams that have been interested for years. We're just going to pull the trigger. And he and James could be the ones that I could kind of see that situation. Pedro makes a ton of sense for a rebuilding club. You just give him a chance. I mean, he's got a little spark plug power. It's not a ton, but I don't know. In Coors Field, it's probably a lot more. And the guys just hit every single year. So I think some team taking a chance on him would not be the craziest thing.
Yeah, Pedro Ramirez is my number 3 guy, right? Like after Riley Martin and James Triantos, like Pedro Ramirez is that guy that I'm kind of teetering back and forth between being added to the Cubs 40-man roster. Like you said, he's hit everywhere he's gone. He was good last year. Obviously, people think that his glove is terrific. He won a Gold Glove in the minor leagues. Did he win it for third base? Yeah, for third base. He played a lot of time at third base and second base. He won it for third base. Yeah, I've been on this podcast as a not nearly as high on Pedro Ramirez as others and others in the 1060 West Discord prospect channel, right? Like that's like people love Pedro Ramirez, and I also love watching Pedro Ramirez. I just haven't been as like everybody I've talked to loves and people in the organization that I've talked to love Pedro Ramirez, and I'm just like not quite there with Pedro as other people are. But like I think you hear enough really good things about him, and you start to question like if the organization does love him this much, and they have pushed him at a young age up levels like they have not done with Cristian Hernandez, could they then push the envelope again and add him to the 40-man roster? I think that makes a ton of sense from the Cubs perspective to go ahead and add him. So, yeah.
I agree with that. He's actually maybe the guy that I would talk myself into more. Just because, maybe it's a decision between James and Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
Could be, now that I think about it.
All right. We'll wrap this up here pretty quick. A couple more names I want to just toss out there. We can kind of rapid fire them a little bit. Connor Noland probably deserves a little bit of love on this episode. Again, like what we were saying with Brandon Birdsell, just not quite as good of stuff, but like he is in AAA as major league rotation depth right now, regardless of if he's on the 40-man roster or not. A team could look at him and be like, hey, I'll throw him in as a long reliever on my team or as a number 5 starter. And like, actually, what I view Connor Noland as a good example of is a guy that gets added or selected in the Rule 5 draft and sent back to his original team after spring training. I think Michael Rucker was a guy that Michael Rucker got selected away from the Cubs. Was it Rucker or Swarmer? Was it Rucker?
It was Rucker.
It was Rucker that got selected away from the Cubs years ago by the Orioles. He spent the entire spring training with the Orioles and then got sent back to the Cubs and ended up coming back up to the Bigs for a little while. So Connor Noland kind of fits that mold a little bit for me. I don't think the Cubs will add him again, but I think that he fits that mold.
Yep.
And then the only other guy I wanted to mention here is someone that has received a lot of love from us on this podcast. That's Grant Kipp. Grant Kipp, the stuff I think can really play out of the bullpen. I could see a team taking Grant Kipp, who was a starting pitcher in the Cubs organization, and saying, you know what, like you're our last reliever in the major league bullpen. Grant Kipp might be the guy that would I could see the Cubs adding to the 40-man roster next week. Like I think that like that would be the one that would throw everybody for a loop. People would be like, who the hell is Grant Kipp? And we'd be like, oh, he's a guy who has a 6 slider. I think that he is like my surprise. He's not my pick. I'm not going to add him here, but I think he's my surprise pick for the Cubs to be added next week.
Yeah, that's a fun one. We've liked Kipp basically since he's been drafted. So, or undrafted, but
signed,
that 2022 draft. Grant and Brody McCullough, who again I have a lot of love for as well. I hope he does well and recovers. But I mean, it is kind of nasty stuff. It is the kind of profile of a team just kind of taking it and being very surprising. Like this guy, immediately everybody fires up Fangraphs and they're like, he's like a 4.37 ERA in AA and he's 26, and it's like, yeah, that's just not how we view pitching anymore. Like, guys pop and I like that. Actually, I like that. I like that a ton. See, I knew when we were going to do this exercise that I came in with like 1.5.
Yeah.
And then I knew I was going to want to keep them all.
And then you have 5. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I'll stay true to my original selection, but I do agree that I think its beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and really, especially pitching development is in the eye of the organization. But that wouldn't be the craziest thing.
Any other names that you want to rapid fire out?
That's just it. I don't think so. I think this really ends up being the list. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like I said, there's 38 other names that we didn't cover here, and some notable names that we are very familiar with on the, like the Frankie Scalzos and Drew Grays and Leo Espinoza, Hayden McGeary. There's a lot of guys that we have talked about a lot on the show But I think that like those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, those 9 guys feel like the group to keep an eye on.
Yes.
Leading into next week's deadline. So your final pick is still just Riley Martin added to the Cubs 40-man roster?
Yes, I'll do. Man, I want to stay true here. I'll do Riley added to the 40-man, and I'll do at least one trade of Triantos or Pedro Ramirez.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna stick with Riley for sure added. I'm gonna stick with. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I think either James Triantos or Pedro Ramirez will be added to the Cubs 40-man roster.
Yeah.
I don't think the Cubs are going to add both of those guys.
Yep.
It would be kind of weird if they did, because their profile is similar enough, right, for how they kind of fit on a 40-man roster. So James Triantos or Pedro Ramirez, and then what the hell, man? The Cubs add Grant Kipp.
Yeah, I'm literally watching. I'm watching highlights of him right now, and I'm like, man, I think that would totally make some sense. Yeah, I'm saying
it here so that when they do add him, that we can come back and be like, look, Greg predicted that. And
yes, yeah, absolutely. Just that should be the tagline of this show. We'll just roll with that. You don't need to put last names on it, but we'll just Greg predicted that. I love it. Actually, print it, obvious shirts. But yeah, no, honestly, I think you had a great call on that. I'm going to stick true to mine, just out of the integrity of the pick. But I love it. I'm literally watching highlights of him right now. I think that was a really inspired selection. If you really want to look at stuff, he had to start like June 15th or June 16th. That was nasty. So definitely go back and watch some of that.
I love it. All right, man. You ready to wrap this up? You want to plug yourself? Plug where we can find you talking ball?
Oh, you can find me online. Most of the Twitter stuff. But God, it's been I'm in like a really long like clinical hospital block right now. So I'm like up and at the hospital at 6:45. However, if I can lock it in just towards the end here, you can find me at Twitter and Blue Sky at Ivy Futures. You can definitely find me talking way too much at the 1060 West Discord. That's something. Reach out if you want an invite. Yeah. If you're like, I've never used Discord, I don't know what that is. Isn't that a video game thing? I hear you. It's basically just like a very fancy message board, a lot of bells and whistles, but we really like it, and it's a great community. So please reach out. Reach out to Greg Huss, myself, Brian Smith. If you want an invite, we're happy to send one your way.
And this offseason, we've got interviews lined up as well. We've got a player interview. This episode is dropping on November 11th, 1 week from today, the day of the Rule 5 or the 40-man roster deadline. I will be dropping an episode of this podcast. It is me interviewing Cubs 5th-round draft pick from a year ago, Cade Snell, and that was a really fun interview. Like, Cade is a great guy. I've been looking forward to getting him on basically since the moment he was drafted. And so be on the lookout for that, dropping on the podcast feeds, the YouTube feed, all that good stuff. If you have a player that you're interested in me trying to get on the show this offseason, drop me a note on the YouTube comment section. Give us a drop the name in the YouTube comments. Let us know who you want to get on the show, and we'll do our very best to get him on. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back in your ears in one short week. Take care, guys.